Israel is prepared to go all the way. Hamas is prepared to go all the way, and we're heading for a catastrophe, a bloodbath and a catastrophe.
To Israel and Gaza and the impact the ongoing and worsening conflict is having across the region and the world. The Israeli army say its ground forces carried out another targeted raid in Gaza last night as it prepares for a full-scale ground invasion. Here's Mark Regev, who's a spokesperson for the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, and also a former Israeli ambassador to the UK. He was speaking a little earlier this afternoon on Times Radio Drive.
Unfortunately, we'd like to be able to tell you that Hamas is ready to give up and surrender and dismantle their military machine, and it could all be done already, but that's not true. They are brutal, they are fanatical, and we're going to have to fight to defeat them. And we will do that when it is, as I said, the optimal time. All I can tell you and your listeners is it will be soon.
Well, this comes as the UN General Assembly are set to vote today on a draft resolution that's been put forward by Jordan and calls for an immediate ceasefire and unhindered humanitarian access to the Gaza Strip. Let's catch up with Nomi Bar Yacoov, an associate fellow at Chatham House's International Security Programme. She's a former UN negotiator, has followed and been closely involved in this conflict for several decades, and she also has a background in arbitration and international law. So just the person to speak to. Good evening, Nomi.
Good evening, Hannah.
I mean, there's a lot. There's always a lot and more happening every moment. But let's start, shall we, with this long-anticipated full-scale ground invasion. Do you have any idea what we can expect, what form it will take?
I think we can expect a total disaster, both for the Israeli army and for Gaza. For the, I think you just quoted in the package you had at the beginning, Daniel Hagari, the Israeli senior army spokesman, who said that Israel plans to go in and bomb the Shifa hospital because the Hamas headquarters are directly below. This has been something Israel's wanted to do, to take out Hamas's military capability, and it's not possible for Israel to do it without getting into the tunnels. And as he explained, the entrance to the tunnels is there, and I think Hamas are setting up traps for Israel. Israel is prepared to go all the way. Hamas is prepared to go all the way, and we're heading for a catastrophe, a bloodbath and a catastrophe.
But what about the reason that it hasn't happened yet? You know, we spoke to you last week. It was imminent then. We're hearing now about the hostages. Do you think these are playing into the decision of when to do this?
I think there are very intense negotiations going on, but I think Qataris are mediating very aggressively to try to get some hostages released. I don't think all of them will be released, and I think that's what's been holding the ground offensive, as well as the US stated that they wanted to ensure that they have all of their defensive gear in place so as to protect their own military personnel in Syria and Iraq and in the region. So I think those are the two main issues, the main reasons why Israel hadn't gone in. I think now it's become public, what may have not have been public last week when we spoke, that President Biden had requested Israel specifically not to go in with boots on the ground until the US has all the defense systems in place. And I think, as I said, there are very, very, very serious negotiations going on behind the scenes, and the thing to try to release the hostages and to try to reach some agreement. But given the tone of Daniel Hagari's statement this evening, I am not sure that how this is going to pan out for the hostages. One thing I am certain of is that Hamas won't hesitate to kill the hostages if they feel threatened. If they said that if civilians will get killed, they will kill the hostages. So I think they're trying to weigh in what's in there for them. They did want 6,000 prisoners released in exchange, all of the Hamas jihad and Hamas prisoners in Israeli prisons, and I don't see Israel releasing 6,000, and I think the negotiations are serious, but are also very tough, and I cannot predict today. I'm sorry, I would love to, but I cannot predict what is going to happen to the hostages. I'm very much hoping that they will all be released. That is my hope. as opposed to my prediction.
I mean, I said this comes as the UN General Assembly voting today on a draft resolution. This is put forward by Jordan and calls for an immediate ceasefire. Do you have any hopes that that will take place? Do you think that will? And even if it does go through, will it mean anything?
No, I think it won't. I think it may go through. I think there have been some very passionate speeches by various ambassadors. The Jordanian ambassador, Ayman Safadi, gave an excellent speech. Of course, Jordan and Egypt are the countries that border with Jordan with Israel and Egypt with Israel and Gaza. So there's a lot at stake for them. The spread to Egypt and Jordan will threaten the regime, the authorities, both in Egypt and in Jordan. So I think they have a lot. They have a lot to fear, as do all the countries in the region. But the General Assembly, as I'm sure your listeners know, is not a binding body. Unlike the Security Council resolutions that are meant to be binding, it's a question of how to implement them. But at least legally, they are binding. The General Assembly resolutions are not, and Israel's already said that, irrespective of the outcome of this resolution, they will take no notice of it.
So they launch the ground offensive that's anticipated. And what is Israel's endgame? What do they want to see in order for this to be finished?
Well, they've stated two clear goals. One is, first is the release that they will try to release the hostages. As I mentioned, I'm not that optimistic that a ground offensive will actually reach that outcome. I think it's going to be tricky. But the main aim is to eliminate the military capability of Hamas and to ensure that no massacres of the nature and scope and the brutality and that happened on the 7th of October in southern Israel will ever happen again. And in order, so the prime goal is to get rid of all of the military arsenal, and the military arsenal is underground and it's under civilian, it's under buildings and under hospitals intentionally, where civilians are held, and under schools, but it's particularly under hospitals, and that's where the problem lies. And then they would like to see Hamas gone. I mean, they'd like to see the political movement gone. They do not want them in Gaza. So the idea would be to transfer, and Israel stated very clearly that it has no intention whatsoever to occupy Gaza, but to transfer Gaza some type of transitional authority until elections will be held, supervised by an international body, and so we're looking at a coalition of different states in the region that could help with that transition. Israel doesn't want anything to have to do with it. They just want to ensure that they are protected and that they do not have an armed movement that is going to potentially massacre babies, behead them, and take old ladies and rape and the like at their doorstep.
Nomi, I asked you earlier about the ceasefire, and of course, we're hearing a lot about a humanitarian pause, something that more people are calling for more widely. What do you make of that and the likelihood of that being something that happens?
No, I think humanitarian pauses will happen. I think humanitarian pauses are the lowest common denominator that the Europeans reached in a statement last night. There were calls for a ceasefire. There were calls for humanitarian corridors. Different European states gave, again, very, very, very passionate speeches about the need for a ceasefire and the need for humanitarian corridors. And at the end of the day, they came out with a sort of watered down statement that they're calling for these humanitarian pauses. I think humanitarian pauses are going to happen, but as we've been discussing in the last 3 weeks, they're a drop in the ocean.